Welcome to Sum of Your Parts podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Betsy Greenleaf, premier pelvic health expert and women's wellness warrior. We'll be discussing women's health topics and how you're greater than the sum of your parts.
There are so many diets out there. It's so incredibly confusing. Eat this. Don't eat that. No, wait. Eat this. Don't eat that. And then here's the newest diet. No, wait. Here's the newest diet. No, here's the best diet ever. Is dieting driving you insane? Well, I've been there, and my next guest has been there. Stephanie Dodier is a clinical nutritionist, intuitive eating expert, and the host of Going Beyond the Food Show, a top-rated wellness podcast. Her unique approach to health and eating is strongly influenced by her own journey with weight loss, food, and body image struggles that began at the age of 12. She spent 25 years bouncing from one diet to the next, only finding herself stuck in the same place. And then she was diagnosed with multiple chronic conditions, and she needed a solution that was not another diet. So she began her healing journey, left her successful career, went back to school, and then opened a health clinic in Toronto, Canada in 2012. She's the creator of the Going Beyond the Food method, a proprietary methodology that takes women through a powerful process to transform their relationship to food and their bodies, learning how to be intuitive eaters and body-confident women. Join me in welcoming Stephanie Dodier.
We're not going to talk about food and I'm a nutritionist. What?
Yes, I know. I love this idea. So I always like to know how people get to where they are. So what brought you to this place?
So I'm 44 years old and I have under my belt a 25-year dieting career. So my first interaction with my body not being good enough was at the age of 12 years old when I was taken to Weight Watcher. My mom, with all her good heart, my mom loved me and she's a great individual, but her response to my body not being in the normal standard size was, you need to go on a diet, which back in the 80s, mid 80s, early 90s, that was the solution, right? We all needed to lose weight and it was the traditional low fat diet and Weight Watcher was the place to go. So I ended up at Weight Watcher at 12 and that kickstarted on and off diet for 25 years. And then at 37 years old, I was at the peak of my corporate career because this is my second career. My first career was in the retail industry. I was an executive with a retailer in Canada. And I was up on stage doing my thing, talking to people, and I collapsed, sent to the hospital, and diagnosed with 5 chronic conditions: depression, anxiety, panic attack, the whole gamut, right? The traditional, you end up in the hospital and all of a sudden you realize you're not healthy, right?
Yes.
Things are not going well. So
they find things. They start testing and find things.
Exactly. So I'm not doing well. And so I went on this search for a solution and I found the world of alternative health, naturopathic medicine, nutrition, and then I dive right into it as a means of healing myself. And I found a passion. And that passion became something that I actually quit my corporate career, went back to school, got a degree in nutrition, and then started to practice with people. And I was seeing the same pattern with my client that I was living with food: restriction, binging, go on a diet, eliminate food, reduce calorie, that doesn't work, do something else, like all those patterns. And the worst thing is I was teaching that to my client.
Oh, sure.
And I was seeing them reacting in the same way. And it was a big aha moment that meant for me, it's not only you. Like, you're not the only one who reacts like this to diet. All the other women seem to have the same pattern. What's going on there, right? And again, with the curious mind that I am, I went out to the world of psychology and eating psychology and like, oh my God. It was a known fact that diet triggered cravings and binging and restriction. And then this statistic came out, like 95% of diet don't work. In 1 to 5 years, people regain all their weight. I'm like, holy crap, that's been my whole life. Why has nobody told me this?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And that's when I stopped talking about food, because nobody else was talking about the reason why we eat and the side effect of dieting. And that's now my mission.
You know, I know that there's a lot of listeners who have been in the same place. I know I can tell you my personal journey's been the same, where I remember when I was in elementary school, they used to call me Bathtub Betsy because they said I was as big as a bathtub. And, you know, as a child to, you know, hear these things and become aware of your weight and the long-term effects. And I think the worst part for me was when I entered medical school was when the American Heart Association, their diet was big. And I remember at that time going into medical school, I was always very thin. And then I was trying to be healthy, and it was this low fat diet. And so I'm eating bagels and bread and all these things that are low fat. I'm being healthy. And I put on 75 pounds in medical school. And like you said, then after that, it was this, and even to this day, it's this lifelong, okay, I did the Weight Watchers, and I figured out ways to cheat the system because of the points. I figured I could eat a big piece of chocolate cake and then eat vegetables all day long, and I would go over my points. Yeah. So what kind of things have you found, and what kind of things do you encourage? Because if it's not like, every time you look, there's a new diet coming out, and it's, I gotta try this diet because this is going to be the one that's going to work. So.
Yeah. So here's where I'm at. So I'm almost 3.5, 4 years into trying to communicate this message, and I've attempted to communicate it through different means, but when we tell people, like the listener right now, I tell you, diet do not work. Here's the statistic. 95% of the dieter regain all of their weight within 1 to 5 years. There's not one study that links weight, BMI, to a disease. It's all correlation. I can push out all those statistics, but people don't buy into it.
Sure. I think because we've all been trained so much that one equals the other.
Yes. Bingo. We have been raised, we think it's innate within us to have to control food. That's the first point that everybody have to understand. It is not innate for the human to have to control food. It's a learned behavior. Yeah. Then the next question is, so why then do we think we need to control food? Right? Why do we want to lose weight? Why is it that we want to maintain a certain weight? What's the real drive behind this? That's where the juice is. That's where unpacking this allows you to understand why you're dieting. And then from there, you understand that diet doesn't work. So why do you, Betsy, want to lose weight? Why do you want to fit in a smaller body is the real question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And I think for everybody, that's probably a different answer.
It's very common, I can say. The answer has different versions.
Okay.
But it all comes into, I want to fit what society expects me to look like.
Yes.
Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, I agree with that one. Yes.
It can have different name to it, but it all comes down to this. I want to be accepted.
Yes.
Now, I want to caveat this to say that you live in the United States, I live in Canada, so the standard in North America is the same as far as expectation of a female body, right?
Yeah.
A thin body is what the expectation is. But if you and me were to travel tomorrow morning and go to a certain country in Africa, for an example, the body type expectation would be different. They don't expect female or women to be in a thin body. It's actually the opposite. So that's the first layer. When I say that to you, you're like, huh, it's true.
Yeah.
Right? So then you have to question, why is it that we expecting women to be thin? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
As a doctor, you're probably going to say to me, because that's healthier. Would that be a fair assessment?
I would think so, but not when you think of, if you think like model thin, like we all want to be model thin, but model thin are, well, in the United States, but model thin is too thin. I mean, that's not a healthy thin. So why do I want to look like, a supermodel? So, that are airbrushed and
yes,
are not necessarily, they don't necessarily look the way they look in the magazines.
So there's different layer. There's the acceptation of society, and then there's what we're being told, that to be healthy, you need to be thin, like BMI centric, around, I think it's 25, 27 you want to be at, right? I'm not a BMI expert, but that's typically, so that's usually the two driver of people engaging with dieting. And we do that younger and younger and younger. And then it becomes a learned behavior. We think it's part of ourselves.
Yeah.
Where in fact, we'll come back to body image in a bit, because I realize we left that hanging there. We'll come back. But in fact, we are born intuitive eater, right? Do you have any children, Betsy?
I do. I have 2 girls. So I have 11 and 9.
So I'm going to bring you back like 9 to 10 to 11 years ago, when your child were born.
Yeah.
Did you have to count their calories or count their macros or forbid certain food or not? No.
No, you just let them eat.
They cry, right? They signify they're hungry. You either breastfeed them or bottle feed them, and then you put the milk in their mouth. They'll drink milk until they're full, and then they'll push out. They're done. If you try to feed a baby that is full, it'll be a never-ending battle. They won't drink the milk.
Sure. Oh, that makes sense.
They respond to their hunger, they respond to their fullness, and their satisfaction level, right? That's intuitive eating. And they carry on doing that until we intervene as parent, or society intervene to say, the way you're nourishing yourself is not good, because look at your body.
Yes.
Or now the new standard of society's focus we have on health is, no, you're not doing this right because you're eating forbidden food.
Yes.
So let me tell you what you should and shouldn't eat.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense.
There's 2 triggers, either it's body size or good and bad food. And then we start ingraining these little children, some as early as 4 or 5 years old, to what they should and shouldn't eat. And then we start messing up with this innate human signal that we have to feed ourselves. We've been feeding ourselves for thousands and thousands of years without any good and bad food lists, any calories or macro. And God forbid, we survive right up to now. And we became the #1 species on the planet.
It's funny, because having 2 young girls, and as they're getting into the preteen ages, it's tough, because I didn't even think about it. Now that you bring this up, is subconsciously I'm messing with them by myself, thinking like, you have to eat, you got to eat healthy. And I'm looking at my behaviors and how I'm putting that on my kids, because I've been like, oh, you got to eat more proteins, less carbs, more proteins, more vegetables. And my older one recently said to me, I don't want to eat, I'm not hungry. And I'm like, you're growing, because I remember I stopped growing when I was 13 and she's 11 now. I'm like, this is your only time to grow, and you're shorter than all your friends, and you have to eat. And I'm going, oh my God. And it wasn't until you just said that now that I'm like, what am I doing?
So to all the moms, and to you, Betsy, this is not about blaming you.
Yes.
You are only, and you brought up the word subconscious, right? Yes. You are only teaching what is currently programmed in your subconscious mind.
Yes.
Because we are not looking at our relationship to food for what the relationship to food is, but instead what it's going to give us at the end, health or weight management.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So we are repeating these behavior and subconsciously, not aware, you're teaching that and we're passing that on to our children.
Yeah.
Right? And then over time, we're starting to turn off their natural hunger and fullness cue for rules. And then they will carry on. And then 14 years old, I mean, it's the time of the Instagram, right?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So now we get into the whole, combine that with the whole, I need to look a certain way because here's the people I follow on Instagram and they're all a size 0 or 2 and they all have bigger breasts and makeup and blonde hair. Like now we're going into the world of I need to change what my body look like to be accepted. And the tool to do that is food.
Yeah.
So now I'm not going to use food to nourish myself. I'm going to use it to achieve a goal with my body.
That's amazing.
And then they grow up to be me at like, say, 40 years old. After doing that for 25 years, your body can't take it anymore.
Sure.
Right? So we have these women, it's either like me that they've been so aggressive that they collapse and they get some kind of condition, or they try to lose weight and then they don't lose weight. And then they end up in our office at 40, 45 years old saying, I can't lose weight anymore. Like, help me. You got to do something for me.
Yeah. And I think it's tough because diets become into popularity. Every 2 seconds, there's a new diet that I know for myself too, I've gotten to the point where it's just so confusing because 1 minute this food's bad, 1 minute that food's bad. Like I'm at the point where I'm like, I don't know what to eat because everything you're telling me that I've been eating is bad. And tomorrow something else that I've thought was healthy is going to be bad. So there's all those messages get so scary and it's hard to figure out what's right.
Well, I think the biggest dichotomy we have today is like keto versus low fat.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. You and I grew up being on the low fat diet, and now we have the extreme, which is just fat.
Yeah.
Right. Like when you step back out of that and you look at this for what it is, like normal eater, people who've never been on a diet or not obsessed with health will look at this like, you guys are stupid. Like, do you know what? And there's population out there of people who think you and I are stupid for being so obsessed with food. Like food is food, just eat food, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I want to talk about this because we have two phenomenon that's happening right now that interfere with our relationship to food. There's the whole diet culture. So let me explain to people what diet culture is. Diet culture is not being on a diet. Diet culture is an entire set of belief that value and worship thinness, the thin body ideal, right? Okay. And there's an entire culture that's built around valuing thinness. Mm. The weapon of choice to achieve thinness is food.
Sure.
So diet culture values ways of eating and fluctuate with what's trendy. So diet culture 20 years ago was low fat. Diet culture today is pushing keto or low carb on everybody.
Yes. Yes.
And people who are able today to be keto, they're superhuman and they're more worthy than the person who just eats carbs.
Sure.
It's attached to your worth.
Yes.
As a human. This is how crazy we went about food. Now, the food you eat means that you're worthy or not. And people who diet culture says to people, so you want to achieve thinness, you need to control food, and then you need to exercise in obsession.
Yes.
And then when we start diving into the world of fitness, if I was on the fitness podcast and I would say to the person, look at the evolution of fitness, right? We had the whole cardio jumping up and down in the 80s, and now we went to CrossFit.
Yeah.
And in the middle of that, there's the people who've been walking every day for 25 years, just doing their thing, right? Normal human movement without all this craziness.
Yeah.
Why do we do that? There's an entire industry behind that. And so when people ask, why is this? Because being on those extreme make you spend money. Right? There's the whole weight loss and the beauty industry that feeds off of you wanting to be thin. Even though you're not meant to be model 10 or BMI of 25, here's all the tools that you then going to use to achieve this thing that you're not supposed to be in the first place. Does that make sense?
I was thinking about that when you were saying that 95% of diets fail. I'm like, no wonder everybody on the face of the earth has a diet book, because guess what? I got to come up with a diet book because it'll sell for a while.
Well, I can guarantee you it's going to sell.
Yeah.
Because because we live in this world that's diet culture. Everybody wants to get in a body size shape. And now today, so here's what's happening today with your teenager. And your teenager is going to be somewhat different than you, because the millennial and the other generation that's coming up under are currently non-acceptance of society standard when it comes to body, to sexual orientation, to political orientation. They're like open, right?
Sure.
Be the size that you want, be the color that you want, be the sexual orientation that you want. So now diet culture is finding out that the millennial don't want to diet no more.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're not in that whole 10 ideal. So people below 25 are like, who cares what I look like? That's not the goal of life.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense.
So now we have an adaptation from diet culture that's called wellness diet. Now you're no longer controlling food to look like a part. You're wanting to achieve health, optimum health. And to achieve optimum health, what is the number one tool?
Food.
Absolutely. So, right? So now we're no longer obsessing about food for losing weight. We're obsessing about food because now we want to be optimally healthy, and the only way to do that is food. Meanwhile, you and I know that stress management is way more important than food.
Sure.
Sleep is way more important than food. Emotional balance is huge because it drives all your action, but yet let's just focus on food.
I'm wondering if it's because food seems something that's easily, I guess, more easily controlled. So maybe that's why it always goes towards that factor to control.
Yes, because we have two things. We have the financial capacity to select food, right?
Yes.
In those countries, right, that we can be obsessed about optimum health or thinness, that we are not about our survival, but we have all this luxury around us. We have the choice to spend a disproportionate amount of money on food supplies and specialty food and supplement, where the country who's not focused on body size or shape does not have that type of luxury. They can only eat what's in front of them. And they're just happy to be able to eat.
Yeah.
And then two, there's the whole learned behavior, right? If I was to tell you, if we were to go back 50 years ago and say we're all going to obsess about sleep, today, all we could talk about was sleep, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Does that help you understand diet culture a little bit better?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I also think about, well, I know the other big diet that's very popular now is intermittent fasting. And I'm so confused about that because I grew up where, you know, it was kind of almost like, I guess maybe because I don't know exactly what it is. I'm like, my definition of it is it yo-yo dieting? Because we're not eating and then we're eating and then we're not eating. I'm like, I grew up in high school and that was supposed to be a bad thing to yo-yo diet. And they kept on telling you, if you do that, you're going to gain more weight. It backfires. And now I'm like being told, no, don't eat after, don't eat anything until a certain time of the day and don't eat after a certain time at night.
Well, I think there's compounding effect of what's happening is that, not I think, science is proving it. When we look at the world of eating disorder, for example, which is a field of study where we clinically diagnose people with distorted relationship to food, right? That is clinically dangerous to their health or survival. There's a spectrum of eating disorder. There's the normal eater, and then there's the person who has an eating disorder where her or his life is in danger. And in the middle, there's the rest of us with a distorted relationship to food.
Yes.
But there's a field of study of people who have eating disorder, and it's a growing field because there's an enormous growth in diagnoses of eating disorder because of the obsession with food we're currently facing as a society. But what we know from the study is that restricting food in any way, that it is volume or types of food or window of eating, like intermittent fasting, triggers an obsessive desire with food.
Yes.
And that, if you study neuroscience, you will, I know that's how the brain is wired, right? We're wired to survive. We're wired to want food to survive. So when there's a barrier in front of us, our reptilian brain kicks in, is like, we want the food. And we're going to eat it enough to make reserve of it because we don't know the next time it's going to come around.
Sure.
And our reptilian brain is not the smartest part of our brain. It is smart, but it doesn't understand, it's just to lose weight to look good. It just sees deprivation, restriction, kicks in survival mechanism. So to come back to the question you asked, no matter how you restrict food, you're going to want more food.
Yeah.
So now we have you and me in our early 40s, people who've been dieting for 20 years and for 20 years have been restricting food, depending on the trend in some way or another. And now we're all confused when it comes to food. And now we need rules to control food because we want food all the time.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And it's funny because every time I purposely, because I always start my diets on Monday, by Wednesday I give them up, but but anytime I really get into a diet, I find that I become more obsessed with food. But when I was just eating whatever I wanted, I do a pretty good job at maintaining. But when I go, all right, that's it, I'm going on a diet, every little thought of the day is like, okay, when's my next meal? When can I eat that other thing? When can I eat that cookie? When can if I eat like 10 pounds of kale, can I have a piece of chocolate later?
And here's a crazy thing. You have those thoughts, but you don't share them with people.
Yeah.
Because you're ashamed of it.
Yes.
Because diet culture and the weight loss industry made sure that you would be ashamed of having those thoughts because you're supposed to have a truckload of willpower and discipline and be controlling your brain to not have those thoughts. So you're the problem, Betsy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now we have millions of women in their home right now, all thinking they're the problem, all by themselves, not talking to anyone and trying the next diet because they're broken. Yet you and me who read literature of studies on dieting know for a fact they're not working.
Yeah.
Right? So we have those millions of women out there that all think it's a problem. Meanwhile, the product, the system, the process is the problem. So that's what my mission is to go out there and let those women know. And I talk to women because that's my field, right?
Yes.
That's who I work with. But men are having the same problem to a lesser extent because the body size of a man has not been as much of a focus in society that it is for women. But you ladies aren't the problem. You, Betsy, aren't the problem. Your brain is functioning perfectly, right? Wow. So what is the option? What is the solution, right? Because we're sitting here sharing all those commonality that we have, all the same struggle. You're like, so how do we get ourselves out of this?
Yeah.
The good news is to recover from dieting, because it's literally a recovery process. The first place is to come back within your body, right? Call that mindfulness, call that body awareness. we need to come back into the body, not on the body, meaning not focus on the body size, but focus about feeling and being in our body, because that's where our intuitive eating capacity, our normal eating capacity are still within us.
Sure.
And I like for people to think of this analogy. Think of your intuitive eating capacity as the pilot in your fireplace. For those that have a gas fireplace or a gas stove, the pilot is always on. But unless you take the dial and turn it into 10, it won't burn any fire. It'll just stay there waiting for you to come home and click the red light to say, let's turn it on. Your intuitive eating capacity, because they're built innately in every single human being on this planet, they're there. They're waiting for you to come within yourself and to listen to your hunger, fullness, and satisfaction cue.
Sure.
Isn't that beautiful?
That is.
What prevents people to do this, and this is where we need to talk about body image, is like, yes, Stephanie, this makes total sense, but I need to lose weight.
Right.
Because let's face it, after like this 20-minute presentation, women are smart. They're like, totally makes sense, Stephanie, right? Like, I'm on board with you, but I'm special. Like, I need to lose weight, so I need to be on a diet. So what's the solution? The question then comes back to where we started. Why is it that you need to lose weight? That's what you need to ask yourself. Then you need to reflect to say, why do I want to lose weight? So may I ask you, Betsy, why is it that you wanted to lose weight back in the days when you were on and off diet? What was your goal?
Well, I still losing weight because I say to myself, my youngest one is 9, and I still have not lost any of the quote, what I say is baby weight, but I can't blame it on baby weight anymore because it's been around for 9 years. So I guess it comes down to, once again, like you said, acceptance and image, and I want to look the way I did before I had babies.
The high school body situation, or the college years of it, right?
Yes.
Right? So you believe that there's something that's going to happen, right? Not something physical. Typically, people want to feel a certain way if they're on a different body size. Would that be a right assessment?
Yeah. Yes.
So what will be those feelings that you think you're going to achieve? We're picking on you. I'm having a session with you.
This is great. This is great because you'll give it, and I'm willing to tell everybody everything. I think it's more, I guess, like I want to feel sexy. I want to feel attractive. I want to feel, I don't know, that people will look at me and be like, oh, she's good looking. I guess they go back to the acceptance.
Inspirational.
Yeah. So
we'll sit with those 3.
Yeah.
And typically there's confidence also attached to this,
yes,
right?
I would agree. Yeah, that's probably the word I'm looking for too.
Right? Confidence is typically wrapped around those feelings: attractiveness, sexy, confidence, inspirational, especially with people in the field of health. Inspiration is a big thing, right? I want to look the part.
Yes.
The question that I have for you is this: do you think you could achieve those feelings without losing the weight?
Sure. Never thought about it though.
That's exactly the point of the conversation, right? What do you mean, Stephanie? Well, the question is, could you, or do you have example in your life of people that are attractive that are not in a conventional body type?
Yeah. I can think of many people that I know that have what would be considered heavier or chubby, but because they have that personality, that big personality, that they exude confidence and sexiness and are beautiful.
Yes.
So,
right?
Yeah.
So those feelings, right? If we were to go back into the world of psychology, we know that feelings are the outcome of a thought, right? So if you go into the world of cognitive behavior therapy, and that's how most psychologists work, right? When people come depressed, they start working on how they think.
Yes.
right? So there's thoughts in your head and your mind right now that attractiveness is a certain size and sexiness is a certain toning on your body, or whatever the story is in your head. So if we change those stories and those thoughts, then you can produce that feeling without having to lose weight.
Yeah.
Then weight then becomes unconditional. Like it becomes something that you can do optionally. Does that make sense?
No, it definitely makes sense.
So that's what I would want people to ask themselves. Then you have to ask yourself, am I living my entire life when it comes to attractiveness, sexiness, confidence, and inspiration conditionally? Like this is a big question, but this is how like reflective we need to get, because clearly you've been at this for how many years, Betsy, dieting?
Oh gosh, probably since high school. So, and I'm going on 48. So
has it worked?
No.
So
it gets harder as you get older.
Absolutely, right? So then you have to ask yourself, am I going to spend the next 20 years of my life? Because it's not going to be a miracle diet, because diet don't work. So what the heck am I going to do? Am I going to do this again for the next 20, 30 years?
Yeah.
Or am I going to ask myself those big questions and do the work and like move on? Does that make sense?
Sure. And I guess, this relationship with food kind of really messes with, maybe it's been like a learned behavior of not being able to pay attention to your food cues, because I've been times when I've sat down and eaten a whole giant industrial sized box of Oreos and never felt full. And I'm like, how can you not be full from that?
Well, then we can get into the world of industrialized food, right? Like Oreo, right? And understand that part of the way that food is engineered is for you to be able to eat the entire box and only feel bad 6 hours later.
Yeah.
Because that's the way it works, right?
Yeah.
6 hours later or the next morning, you're going to feel terrible.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Once it goes through your digestion system, that's where you feel terrible. So then what we do is what we do best as human, we apply dichotomy. Oreo's bad, never eat it again, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you and me now learn about the reptilian brain and how the brain engage with yes and no around food. We want the Oreos. So now we go into the spinning cycle with the Oreos for the rest of our lives, right?
I was reading an article the other day and I was like, why didn't anyone tell me this before? That when you put that label of bad on anything, whether it's food or anything in your life, that now when you do it, you actually trigger the of your brain and it makes you want to do it more. So putting that bad label actually backfires.
Voila. Right?
Yeah.
So part of recovery, right, of dieting, like what I call diet culture recovery, is learning to engage with Oreo like the normal eater.
Sure.
Right? We all have those people in our life. They're far few in between, but they do exist. Those people that never been on their diet their whole life, and they're about 5 to 10 pounds different than their weight in high school. Do you have one of those?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They don't have a problem with Oreo.
But...
Right?
Yeah.
She probably doesn't have a relationship issue with Oreos. She'll eat 2 Oreos, be completely satisfied, and leave the box in the cupboard for the next month.
Yeah.
Why? Because she did exactly what you said. She never put bad on the Oreo, so she eats the 2 Oreos and moves on with her life.
Yeah.
That's what we need to go back to.
Yeah.
And it is possible with intuitive eating. So now we are taking this skill set that we are born with, and we're saying there's millions and millions of people who are in this situation that you and me, Betsy, are in. How can we help them? We build a framework around how to come back to intuitive eating. So there's an actual process, step 1 through 10, like 10 principle that my mentor, Evelyn Triboli, which is a dietitian and a researcher, has put together to help people regain their skill set that they were born with. And one of those processes, removing labels on food. The other process is accepting your body. Like there's 10 principles that we go along and teach people.
So are you saying that, looking beyond the relationship with food, I guess also with kids, I have this schedule. You got to eat breakfast, you got to eat lunch, you got to eat dinner, and it has to be at these times. Would you say that just eat when you're hungry and not eat when you're not hungry? Like,
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I don't know if your children, were they picky eater?
My oldest one is, and it, of course, drives us crazy. I'm even at the point now where I'm like, listen, you tell me what you like and I'll make it, because and I also, I'm hyper aware of her age, and I don't want her to end up with a eating disorder, because I did that typical mom thing for a while where I was like, finish what's on your plate, or this is what's for dinner. I'm not making you anything else. And now I'm just like, all right, well, eat whatever you want. And if you don't like what I make, then you go make something else, because I'm like, I get it. I don't want to be the cause of a problem.
So picky eater twofold for parents who have picky eater. Number one, traditionally picky eater were raised around some kind of rulings around food, either volumes of food, types of food, healthy food, non-healthy food, eat your plate, eat your vegetable first. And their behavior around picky eating is typically a rebellious behavior. It's totally unconscious, totally subconscious. Your child is not doing that to annoy you. It's totally subconscious. They're just fighting the rules that the system that was established around them. There is some super taster. There is a percentage, and I can't tell you exactly, something around the 1% to 2% of people that are super taste bud and really are picky eater because everything has this super taste to it. Most children is just rebellious, right?
Yeah.
But non-conscious rebellious eater. So what do we do with those people? We always say to parent, they don't want to eat, let them starve. You'll see. And people are hearing that, moms are hearing that, like, bad.
I know. And I remember the pediatrician telling us years ago, just they'll eat when they're hungry.
Yes.
But the mom comes out, I mean, like, and I'm part Italian too, so there's you gotta eat. You gotta eat.
Control, right? But the truth is, your child will not let themselves die of hunger.
Yeah.
The kick in, the natural instinct of survival, the reptilian brain will kick in at some point and they'll end up eating, right? So to your question, do we eat when we're hungry and full? Absolutely, right? And typically when we go through the process of reacquiring our intuitive eating skill, and the children who've never been through control of food do that naturally, right? They'll know how much to eat if they're on a regular eating schedule, right? 3-4 meals a day, they'll know exactly how much to eat to get themselves to the next meal.
Yeah.
Right? Because they know around the house, we have lunch typically around 11 and 1. They'll know intuitively how much food to put in their mouth to get themselves to that level. And they'll have days where, growth spur, they'll need more food. And then at 10 o'clock, they'll be wanting more food. Just let them go to the fridge and have more food.
Yeah.
But yes, we need to eat when we're hungry and full. And then what happened, depending how much distortion with your relationship you have to food, there'll be a period of weeks and months where this will be completely off tilt, right?
Yeah.
Until your bodies suddenly slow down and realize that this is safe now around food. There's no more restriction. There is no more deprivation. I can trust you, dear human. You're going to feed me properly. Okay, I'm going to settle down now. We call that the pendulum effect. That's where binge eating comes from.
Yeah.
Right? Binge eating is when you swing the pendulum on one side after being restricted for so long, you eat everything in sight.
Oh, been there.
Right?
Yeah.
And then at some point you panic, you swing the pendulum to the other side, and now you restrict everything.
Yeah.
Until you can't do it. And then you spend your whole life swinging like this. So if you know how a pendulum acts, it will keep swinging. Even if you don't apply force to it, it will keep swinging. And then the momentum will slow down. And then you'll get to the middle, right? Where the pendulum doesn't swing no more. And that's what's called intuitive eating, mindful eating.
That's a great image. I like that.
So that's the piece. Now, I want to come back to the whole body image because I think we left it high and dry again, right? We need to work on, Betsy, you, the listener, desire to be thin. Because if we don't come to term with that, we'll go back to dieting at some point.
Sure.
Right? So we need to start thinking, how am I going to recreate a relationship with my body that is one of self-care and self-love. Now, self-love for women who've had shamed their body their whole life is too much of a stretch. And that's what I found clinically in working with people. So I'm more of a body neutral practitioner. I teach what I call body neutrality as opposed to body positivity.
Okay.
Right? So if you are anywhere on social media, you're probably seeing a ton of body positivity, like people in their underwear and their bra, right? Showing their body.
Oh, sure.
In our world, we call these people activists. They're there to trigger social boundaries and change and political change, right? Clinically, as a practitioner helping people, that's not what I want to do, right? I want to bring people to a place of neutrality where their body is their tool to go through life.
Yes.
Instead of being their worth, right? Their confidence, their attractiveness, their sexiness, we want to start working on bringing back our relationship to our body to be the thing we use to have a relationship with our children, to have a career, to achieve something socially, perhaps work in our church or teach or whatever our goals and our passion is. Our body is the tool that will allow us to achieve those things. And that becomes then a relationship of care. I'm going to care for this physical body so it can carry me through life and allow me to experience the human experience. Does that make sense?
That does make a lot of sense.
How does it make you feel?
I just started to think that all the energy that me personally, that I expend on trying to look the right way and it goes back to mindfulness, when that's time and energy that I could be putting to better use.
Yes.
So,
right?
Yeah.
Whatever your passion is today, you can then re-anchor this energy in living your passion, being a mom or your career, building a business, whatever the thing is. And then don't discount the mental energy. Like if you can free yourself off of the whole conversation that happens in your head, like, because I know it's there in your head and all the people listening, thousands of thoughts every day about criticizing yourself, judging yourself, not being good enough, not being perfect enough, right?
Yeah.
It just goes on and on and on and on. If we can free ourselves from that, talk about stress relief, huge, right? And we know when we start looking at health from a medical perspective, one of the silent killer is stress.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's probably one of the largest causes for all the chronic diseases that are out there. And you're right, what you brought up earlier was food's been blamed for a lot of that. And it's not necessarily the issue.
No, because, so here's the thing. I'm not discounting the importance of food. The problem is how the human is wired to relate to food. Putting pressure on it fires back.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, there is an importance to food, but the way we've been approaching it is what's causing the problematic. So the whole obesity crisis, I have a completely different perspective on this because we have self-created that by trying to manage people's food. And putting more pressure on the relationship to food is going to continue to increase the obesity crisis, right? Instead, if we were to let go on that, but start relating to our body from a self-care perspective, then we would probably realize how much stress we're self-inducing by trying to achieve a certain body type, by trying to be perfect keto, right? If we just remove that, I mean, we probably, for women that are on diet, release 50% of their stress. Just that alone.
Yeah.
And then can we sleep better when we're not that stressed? Absolutely. right? When we don't have to wake up, like I've talked to somebody yesterday who wakes up at 4:30 in the morning to go to the gym for an hour and a half every day.
Yeah. I've never been that motivated.
Because that's the only way she can maintain her weight.
Yeah. I have a neighbor who she walks. I can't tell you how many hours a day she walks. And I walk with her often. And she says that the reason she does it is so that she can eat the things that she wants to eat.
There you go.
You know? And I'm like, I'd rather just not eat those things and sit my butt on the couch than do all those hours of walking. But
so it's about seeing health for other elements than food. So we call that, in my world, a weight neutral approach to health.
yeah.
So taking the equation of weight out of your health profile and then saying, okay, let's look at everything else now, which is like a huge part of your health, by the way. And let's look at everything else. How can we help you sleep better, reduce stress, fresh air, go in nature, like all of those other things. Yeah. Let's help you bring that back online. And then let's teach you how to have an intuitive relationship to food. And guess what's going to happen? You're going to naturally at some point be inclined to eat less Oreo. Because when you binge on the entire box of Oreo, you feel terrible the next day.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? And now when you're turned in within you, right? And you're turned into the way you feel, you're like, I don't want to feel like this. It's totally my choice, right? I can if I want to. I'm allowed now. Do I want it? So now you make a choice from a place of intention instead of restriction. And you're naturally going to eat better.
And how does this affect the food choices? Because it's not just a relationship with food in general. I mean, we have these processed foods, we have, whole foods, we have raw foods. So how do you kind of get people to come to a better relationship with the types of foods they're picking?
The first layer I want to address is socioeconomic status.
Yes, of course.
So if we could all have a fridge filled with fresh vegetables and fresh fruits and grass-fed meat, life would be better for everyone.
Yeah.
The reality is there's many, many people, and I don't have the right statistic, but somewhere in the upward of 50 to 70% of North American population that is on a tight budget.
Yeah.
It's not because they don't put the right amount of money. They just don't have the money.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a meal at McDonald's is a lot cheaper than organic, fresh foods.
And then you have the food desert, right? Where people who live in big urban center do not have grocery store for miles and they don't own cars.
Yeah.
Right? So there's this whole piece that we cannot disregard, right? When we take that off from there and we say, you have the financial capacity to buy whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
From that place, when we reconnect back to our ability to be intuitive eater, we make peace with the whole my body is my word situation. Like we do this work and we come back to live a mindful life, you will then look at your satisfaction cue to say, perhaps I feel better when I eat raw food. Perhaps I feel better when I eat a vegetable or a salad. Let's eat salad and see how I feel. I feel great. Good. I'll take the example of a country like mine in Canada. So right now it's -20 out there and there's a foot and a half of snow.
Okay? I was complaining about it was 22 degrees in New Jersey today. -20. Oh, forget that.
Your desire for food changes with the weather.
No, wow, yeah.
Right? Which is natural. So if you study in a older type of medicine like Ayurvedic medicine, they knew that. Or even traditional Chinese medicine, they knew that, right? When the climate changed, your nutritional need changed. So guess what? I've been eating soup for the last 3 weeks and crave soup.
Wow, yeah.
Don't talk to me about a salad right now.
Yeah.
I don't want a salad. That is the proof that the human body knows what it needs and when it needs it, versus being told that I have to eat keto 24/7, 365 days a year.
Yeah, because I agree, because like a salad on a day when it's cold, it just doesn't seem satisfying, because I don't want to eat something cold. I want something hearty and warm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or let's talk about holidays, because we're coming up. I don't know when this podcast will be distributed, but right now, holidays, the Thanksgiving is in a couple weeks.
Yes.
Right? So North American traditional meal for Thanksgiving is turkeys and stuffing and pies and all of this, right? So I'm going to eat the stuffing, the pie, and everything, right? And I'm going to enjoy it, because it's not about eating the forbidden food. It's about being with my people.
Yes.
Right? The human relationship through food is what's more important. And truth to be told, as human, we've had an emotional relationship to food forever, like thousands and thousands of years. Go back to the tribal day where the men went out and hunted an animal, and we all gathered around the fire and ate the animal.
Yes.
We celebrated, we danced, right? We sang song, no matter what the tribe you were in, around food. Thanksgiving is exactly the same thing. It's an emotional meal. But not because you're deprived or because you're stressed to death, but because you want to enjoy people.
Yeah.
So we got to think of this angle of our relationship to food, and forbidding emotional eating is wrong, because we're wired to eat emotionally.
Yes.
The problem is as modern human, in some cases, some of us have started to connect to food to solve all of our emotional crisis.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I laugh because I have this story when I was a general surgery resident, and the stress that you're under. I remember I used to get called to put in these things called central lines. And I had started this process where I'd get a phone call, we need you to come put in a central line. And I'd be like, all right, babe, right there. And I would go downstairs first to the cafeteria, grab a donut on my way to go put the central line. And then a couple hours later, same thing, pattern. And then downstairs, grab a donut, go put the central line.
Right? I don't know what a central line is, but it sounds pretty important,
yes,
right?
Yes, it was. It was and stressful. So it was definitely creating this pattern of stress eating, you know.
Because you had no other means of managing your stress.
Yeah, or like, I'm having a bad day, I deserve that donut. You know?
Exactly.
So
where in the past, if you go back in the past, we had ways to manage our emotion beyond food for a multitude of reasons. First of all, food wasn't available in abundance for us to have donut. So we had to have other ways of managing our emotion. So we have to learn, part of this process is disconnecting from food to solve our emotional crisis. Can we turn to something else? And that's when the big M word comes in, mindfulness, right?
yes.
Mindfulness is this amazing scientifically researched tool that manages your emotion. Right?
Yes.
So again, that's why intuitive eating and mindfulness are like big sisters and big brothers, because when we learn to tap back into our innate eating cue, we have no choice but to become mindful.
Yes.
And now we can start using that to manage our emotional crisis instead of the donut.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's different than Thanksgiving emotional eating. You see the difference?
Yeah, there's a difference. One is more of a sense of community versus one we're substituting facing those emotions and dealing with those emotions with food.
Yes. So there's many angles to our relationship to food and to our body as well.
So in countries that I guess have limited food, or we don't see these kind of problems. They don't have the same kind of issues, do they?
Well, what do you consider an issue? Let's begin by that.
I guess, this unhealthy emotional relationship with food.
No, and I'm going to advance to say that's because they don't have the thin ideal.
Okay.
It all originate all from there. Here's a fact for you. The first diet is 1888.
Oh,
Okay, so call it 130 years old.
yeah.
Before that, the diet word didn't even existed.
Hmm.
It didn't even, like, people did not comprehend this whole system of manipulating food. The word calorie got created as a way of measuring the energy for an engine of a car. It was never created for human.
Wow.
We took the engineering principle from a car engine and then we applied it to the human being.
Yes.
That's how crazy this is. So if you take that layer off, and the word diet got created because, so now we can get in the whole angle of feminism, but bottom line is this diet got created to manipulate women's body as they were gaining power in society.
Ah.
Right?
Yes.
So as women started to get educated in the late 1800s and became stronger, and economically some women started to make more money, and then you turn to 1900 and now we're fighting for the vote to right, the right to vote, sorry. Then, like, the patriarchy society into which we live in, right? Patriarchy is this society that we have for the last 2,000 years that's dominated by male as a source of power.
Yes.
Now we are like, the patriarchy society feels threatened by women.
Yeah.
Right? And now you have this, at the same time, this whole image through print that starts happening, right? Magazines and paper portraying an ideal type of body.
You know, it's interesting. I was talking to a woman the other day, and she brought up this terminology that I'd never heard before. It's a very similar idea. She called it the bikini industrial complex.
Yes.
And I was
Same
like,
thing.
I love that terminology. Yeah.
Same thing. So as all of this, like, this is a conjunction of many things. It's not just one thing, right? If we didn't have the paper and the magazine printing an image of a female body type, then we likely wouldn't have the diet industry.
Yeah.
Right? It all came together, and then you have the socio-economical situation behind it, men going to war, women starting to work, and they're like, oh my God, we can do this and we can earn money and it feels good when we earn money, let's earn more. Patriarchy freaks out. And then you have the period of what's called the feminine mystique, right? Where women were shoved back at home for the men to come back, and then the diet industry just start, like, rising.
Yeah.
Because women have nothing else to do. Like, when you were a woman in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s, your goal in life was to have a husband that was happy in a clean home, and you had to look a certain way.
Sure.
Right? So your grandmother, perhaps even your mother, were raised into this. So now they gave birth to Betsy, and what did they teach to Betsy?
Yes.
You have to do the same thing, right?
Exactly.
Because that's how you get your worth as a woman.
Yeah.
Now, Betsy is very indoctrinated into this whole system.
It's actually, I mean, you see it a lot around the town that I live in, because we have a large number of women who don't work in my town, and they kind of get referred to as the yoga moms, and that their job is to basically get the kids on the bus, and then they're all going to the gym because they have to look good, you know?
Yes.
So I'm like, wow, it's the same pattern.
It's what they call, if you look at, like, feminist history, it's called the feminine mystique.
Yeah.
Because we have this intrinsic need as human to be worthy.
Yes.
Right? And now we have those educated women, those yoga mom, who all have an education, they have a functioning brain.
Yeah.
And they have nothing to do. They have no way of exercising all this power in them. So let's focus it on the body.
Yeah.
And now we become obsessed with our body, and we use all our brain power to, like, hopefully have some kind of acceptable body or look good, and then we can talk about, we're not going to talk about that because that's a whole gap, but the whole industry of looking young.
Yes.
It's the exact same pattern, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Is what Naomi Campbell, for those interested in this field of learning, like the history of feminism, Naomi Campbell wrote the book called The Beauty Myth.
Yeah.
which I think should be a book that all women out there should read, because the beauty industry is like parallel to the weight loss industry.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right? So now, not only at our age, me and you, Betsy, do we not want to look fat, we certainly don't want to look old. So now we have to focus, right?
Yes. Yes. I've been dealing with that one over the last year too.
Exactly. So where's your passion into this, right? Where's your life purpose into this?
Yeah.
Right? So you got to make peace. We have as women to make peace with that as well, because again, it's a double whammy of rubbing our energy and our power.
Yeah, that's very deep and so true.
But so let's bring it back to simplicity as we're closing this interview.
Yeah.
The first place I want all of you ladies to start is into your relationship to food. Okay. Start from that place and follow the model of intuitive eating. There's a different way for you to get educated around that. You can pick up the book called Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Tribole, Amazon, right? You can come to a place like me in my world where I teach intuitive eating in a supported way, not just reading a book, but actually coachings and program and structure around it. And then that, through your work around your relationship to food, you will ignite every other part slowly and gradually.
Yeah.
Right? So that's where I suggest people to start with.
And it just to be amazing to see, taking that energy and focus off of the food and the body image, all the things that we can do when we put that focus on the other things in life that make us happy.
Yes. That's what I call claiming your power back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you become dangerous.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're going to have, a whole bunch of dangerous women coming at you.
Or we have dangerous women that creates powerful business, or we have moms like you who are about to enter the critical stage of their daughter's life.
Yes.
I would say that's 50% of my clients and patients is women like you who have now clicked in that how they behave around food shows up in their daughters.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my God, I don't want that for my girls.
Yes.
So I need to do something about me because I lead the way.
Exactly. And you can stop the cycle. Because like you said, I know my mom will be listening to this podcast, and I apologize, Mom, but she'll probably admit, like, we both have a bad relationship with food. She's dieted her whole life. I can think back on, like, from a young age and people commenting on her figure because she'd always had a great figure, and then me becoming self-conscious about keeping my figure. And then, we always are comparing our notes about, like, oh, we got to get back on the diet, or we ate too much, and oh, how bad. So it's, whether she learned that, I don't know if she learned that from her mother, but wherever she learned that, then I learned that from her. And then I need to, stop that cycle, not keep passing that down. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And some cycle, we call that, some circle, we call that generational trauma.
Yeah.
Where it's passed on from one generation to the other. We see that in pattern in drug addiction and alcoholism, right? We say it's genetic, but there's not I don't want to speak to genetic because I'm not an expert, but there's not like a gene that's going to make you an alcoholic. It's how you're raised around it. You may have tendency.
Yes.
But it's activated by your environment.
Sure. And your behaviors. Yeah.
Dieting trauma is the exact same thing.
Wow. Oh, this is amazing. I am so excited that I was able to speak with you today, and I really appreciate your time. So I also wanted to mention out there that people can find you on stephaniedodier.com. That's StephanieDodier.com. And that you also have Going Beyond the Food Method.
Yes. And the podcast, for those listening to podcasts, Going Beyond the Food podcast. We have over 215 episodes that dives into this whole concept, all the different angle to it.
This is great. And I think you're going to be my next new listen for podcasts.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Stephanie, for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Betsy.